You will feel that we are your worthy brothers in arms, and you will know that we shall never tire nor weaken, but march with you into any quarter of the world that may be necessary to establish the reign of justice and of law among men.
Here it's 1943, and the royal family is on an inspection tour of the English countryside, examining one of the many farms that raises wheat for the troops. And Princess Elizabeth, along with her sister Margaret, are enjoying the tour as much as any of the rest of them. Here, King George decides to take a quick moment and examine one of the royal crown heads of wheat. Is it good enough to supply food for the troops and make many loaves of bread? Yes, they're enjoying this. Mass production is at its highest, and those who are following in the rear are examining the wheat chaff and the dogs, who seem to enjoy their outing as much as anyone. On the inspection tour, King George examines the wheels, and the family discusses going home. They agree it's been a good day. Get up, Hoffy. Let's go back to Buckingham Palace.
Madam Chiang Kai-shek, First Lady of China, is welcomed to Washington by Mrs. Roosevelt, First Lady of the United States. Madam Chiang, for 15 weeks under medical care in New York, appears quite recovered as she hurries to greet President Roosevelt, who awaits her in his automobile. Her momentous meeting with the President is her first public appearance in the United States. A guest of the White House during her stay in the Capitol, the Chinese Joan of Arc has a busy calendar. Senators, lawmakers are eager to shake her hand. A tremendous ovation marks her dramatic appearance before the House of Representatives. Here, American-educated Madam Chiang Kai-shek, called the most powerful woman in the world, addresses the elected representatives of the American people.
You, as representatives of the American people, have before you the glorious opportunity of carrying on the pioneer work of your ancestors beyond the frontiers of physical and geographical limitations. You have today before you the immeasurably greater opportunity to implement these same ideals and to help bring about the liberation of man's spirit in every part of the world. I can also assure you that China is eager and ready to cooperate with you and other peoples to lay a true and lasting foundation for a sane and progressive world society which would make it impossible for any arrogant or predatory neighbor to plunge future generations into another orgy of blood.
Today, with the rationing of meats, cheese, butter, and fats, we're going to tighten our belts another notch for war. Nearly everyone has War Ration Book 2, so there will be no registration. You will use stamps out of the same book, but now, in addition to the blue stamps, you will use the red stamps for meat, cheese, butter, and fats. These red stamps mean a fair share for everyone. When you use them, you are helping to stamp out the black market. America's food has gone to war. With rationing at home, you can feel sure that our men on the fighting fronts are getting the food they need.
In Hollywood studios, an army of skilled technicians produce hundreds of motion pictures every year. Today, the great studios work not only to supply entertainment to people at home, but have dedicated their resources to the armed forces wherever they serve. Army units assigned to making training films and to photograph action at the front learn camera technique from studio experts. In laboratories and cutting rooms, men in uniform are preparing their own productions. They study training films made by the industry and films made by their own signal corps. Whether it's how to put on a gas mask or how to handle a gun, everything is covered in Army motion pictures. The latest feature pictures made for theaters are reduced to 16mm size for showings at Army camps at home and overseas. Every week, Army planes transport 150 features, some 200 newsreels and short subjects to fighting forces around the world. In recreation centers, stars such as Ann Miller and Linda Darnell, John Garfield and Betty Davis are helping entertain servicemen. Lovely Greer Garson, little Judy Garland, beautiful Hedy Lamarr, popular Betty Grable. At home and abroad, people of the motion picture industry are trying to do their bit for fighting men of the United Nations. America launches a nationwide campaign to raise funds for the Red Cross. Mrs. Roosevelt and Crown Princess Martha of Norway are among the notables appearing at the New York Madison Square Garden to aid the cause. The huge throng is treated to patriotic entertainment by the world-famous music hall Rockettes. Once a year, Hollywood honors its brightest stars. Tonight, they also salute the 27,000 men of the cinema industry now serving in the armed forces. Now, Gary Cooper, voted the best actor for 1941, awards the prize for 1942. The winner, Jimmy Cagney, for his Yankee Doodle Dandy. From lovely Joan Fontaine, Irish-born Greer Garson wins the award for her unforgettable Mrs. Miniver, the new king and queen of Movieland.
Following the motion picture industry's policy of everything for victory, a cavalcade of movie stars comes to Washington to add impetus to the Third War Loan Drive. At the Washington Monument, the gang is treated to a feature show, Back the Attack, based on the dramatic appeal of the bond drive. The movie industry, like all industry, is determined to make the third loan an outstanding success.
An armistice with Italy has been concluded. It is a great victory for the United Nations, but it was also a great victory for the Italian people. After years of war and suffering and degradation, the Italian people are at last coming to the day of liberation from their real enemies, the Nazis. But let us not delude ourselves that this armistice means the end of war in the Mediterranean. We must drive the Germans out of Italy as we have driven them out of Tunisia and Sicily. We must drive them out of France and all other captive countries. And we must strike them on their own soil from all directions. Our ultimate objectives in this war continue to be Berlin and Tokyo. I ask you to bear in mind that these objectives mean that we have still a long way to go before attaining them. The great news that you have heard today from General Eisenhower does not give you license to settle back in your rocking chairs and say, well, that's over. We've got 'em on the run. Now we can start the celebration. This war does not and must not stop for one single instant. Our fighting men know that. Now, it is your turn. Every dollar that you invest in the Third War Loan is your personal message of defiance to our common enemies, to the ruthless savages of Germany and Japan. And it is your personal message of faith and good cheer to our allies and to all of the men at the front. God bless them.
Lieutenant General Patton, commanding the American 7th Army in Sicily, leaves headquarters in an armored car as United Nations forces continue to sweep northward in their drive to occupy the entire Italian island. Enthusiastic Sicilians welcome the Yanks with open arms, scenes that are repeated in town after town as the Americans press on to Palermo. General Eisenhower, named to command the gathering Allied invasion forces, surveys the Italian front with General Clark, 5th Army Commander. In the mountains of central Italy, he observes artillery fire blasting the way toward Cassino. Cautiously, American troops enter the battered town of Lagoni. Hard hit by shell fire, Lagoni has just seen the last of German occupation. The Nazis were forced to abandon the town in the face of the Allied advance. The natives return to welcome the soldiers of the United Nations. Heroic defense of Stalingrad. The Soviet army turning the Nazi six-month assault into the most ghastly military disaster in German history. Held high, the beaten Nazis pour from house after house in abject surrender. Hitler's generals give up too, 24, including a field marshal. Here is Lieutenant General von Daniel, commander of the veteran 376th Division. Lieutenant General Sand commanded Hitler's pride, the crack 100th Division that smashed through Belgium and France. Berlin says that German generals never surrender. Germany's Romanian allies. Brigadier General Dimitriu, commander of the 20th Romanian Infantry, suffers the same fate as that of his German colleagues. 5 more Axis generals who failed at the Stalingrad Hitler vowed he'd take. Lieutenant General Schlemmer, whose 14th Tank Corps helped conquer Holland. Lieutenant General von Drever, whose 297th Infantry invaded Greece. Lieutenant General Rinaldi, medical chief of the 6th German Army. Biggest catch of all, Field Marshal Frederick von Paulus, commander-in-chief of all Axis armies at Stalingrad. Taken to headquarters of General Shumilov for questioning, von Paulus has much to answer for. He is the man who ordered the extermination of every civilian in Stalingrad. Calmly, quietly, General Shumilov reviews von Paulus' record. This is the von Paulus who, 2 months before, threatened the families of his own soldiers with death if one man should surrender. Berlin claimed he was captured only because he was gravely wounded. Actually, a young Red Army lieutenant found him hiding in the basement of a department store and brought him in without a struggle. These also gave up. Cold, starved, emaciated, defeated. Remnants of 22 beaten Nazi divisions. Now they plod toward a Russian prison. Proudly, the red flag flies again over the heroic city of Stalin, as endless lines of Nazi prisoners write the final chapter in the Battle of Stalingrad. Here, the might of the German 6th Army met the courage of a people fighting for life and liberty. United States and Australian troops under General MacArthur advancing through the almost impenetrable jungle for the attack that ended all organized Japanese resistance on the Papuan Peninsula of New Guinea. Guns commanding a narrow beach, the Yanks move into position to cut off the Japs from the sea. Blasted from foxholes, from carefully prepared positions, 15,000 Japs were killed in this one campaign. A Red Cross field hospital cares for allied wounded. Fortified with modern sulfa drugs to prevent infection, most casualties will recover. Thus, the first American offensive to be transported and supplied entirely by air power moves on to new theaters of operation. Army surgeons, sterilizing their precious equipment under the most primitive of conditions, have won a battle too. Their brave efforts have saved many lives, relieved much suffering. Along the trail, a Papuan hut run by friendly natives specializing in steaming tea, a welcome spot for battle-weary men. These Australian and American jungle fighters of General MacArthur have won a real victory. And what's more, they've proved they can beat the Jap in any kind of warfare. Advance units of the British 8th Army enter Tripoli, metropolis of Libya. Climax of a drive that chased the Nazis 1,300 miles in 13 weeks. Today, the monument to the wolf that suckled the twin founders of Rome looks down upon victorious British tanks. Scene of official surrender. General Montgomery receives the Italian governor, his Lord Mayor, and Chief of Police. With the Union Jack flying over Libya, General Montgomery is not one to rest on his laurels. Riding through the city that once was the pride of Mussolini's colonial empire, General Montgomery pushes on to join the Americans and the British First Army in the fight for Tunisia. Already his tanks are on the move toward the final battle for North Africa. In the South Pacific, Allied air forces are increasing their attacks upon the Japs. Giant liberators, bound for Nauru, an important Japanese base northeast of the Solomon Islands, leave the enemy stronghold smoking and in flames. Now Attu, in the bleak, barren Aleutians. Here, more than 2,000 miles from the United States, planes lead the way in the drive that blasts the Japs from the island. Infantrymen track down the enemy, prepared to fight hand to hand. The result, the Japanese garrison wiped out. In North Africa, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker, famous ace of the last war, talks with pilots of General Doolittle's bomber command. These are some of the men who are softening up Italy and the continent for invasion. Arriving in New York City, Gunder Haig, Sweden's great distance runner, is welcome to America.
Welcome to the United States, Gunder.
Ja, tack för välkomsthälsningen. Jag är mycket glad att vara här i Amerika och jag ska göra mitt bästa.
Haig, holder of 7 world's records, loses no time limbering up his sea legs. A sample of the form that won him international fame. Here to compete in athletic contests for Army Relief, the Swedish champion hopes to add new stars to his brilliant crown. Men of the United States Navy serving in Australian waters and their soldier brothers in arms take over the Sydney Sports Ground for a truly American sports classic, an Army-Navy football game. 35,000 are here for the contest, and whether or not the Australians understand the game, they cheer just as heartily for one team as the other. Rougher, more spectacular than rugby or soccer, football, Yankee style, is something new to this continent. The girls seem to have caught the spirit too. Gala entertainment for Americans serving the United Nations thousands of miles from home.
Pimlico Racetrack, with Count Fleet the center of interest as they go to the post. And Johnny Longden ain't fooling as he steps the favorite out into an early lead. After all, 43 grand is a lot of money. And with an 8-length lead, it looks like Mrs. Hertz's fine 3-year-old was a step nearer Kirsten's coveted Triple Crown. Now the Preakness winner, Victor, in the Kentucky Derby. It's going to take quite a horse to stop this Grand Slam try in the Belmont Stakes.
The President's official home. American headquarters for leaders of the United Nations. Here Mr. Roosevelt lives, working long hours into the night. But when 7 o'clock comes, here is one chap who usually gets his supper direct from the hand of the President. His name is Fala, a 3-year-old Scottie, and the President's only pet. Fala's quite an accomplished dog, and equally fond of his master. A rare and interesting glimpse into the human qualities of the man who is President of the United States.
And so, here's a one-ring circus with a barrel of monkeys at the Zoological Park in St. Louis. You're probably not dreaming, but you may have your doubts after you see the show that these monks put on. If the Army sees this one, it'll get a new angle on commando training. Share your carpool idea in monkey style. Get a pony and invite your friends. But suffering shades of a zoot suiter's dream. What's this? He's probably the treasure of the troop. What a getup. And here's some more transportation. The way these guys can handle horses. The champ jockey of Monkeytown. Is he the show-off? Anything to get a laugh. And here's the payoff on getting a seat when you're boarding the 515. Hey, what about me? Ah, yes. Psychology is being used to train the youngsters of Vancouver, British Columbia, as Captain Bates introduces the Mickey Mouse gas mask to a kindergarten class. The Mickey Mouse gas mask is attractively colored and equipped with a noisemaker which operates when the wearer exhales. The children become so occupied with the play element that their minds are kept far from fear. The masks retail for $1.25, or when occasion requires, they will be donated. And do the children approve? Well, this picture tells the story why they even fit the masks to their dolls.